Hello, Paul.
Hiya, you okay?
Yeah, I'm fine. Thanks for coming.
That's okay.
The meeting is now live on YouTube.
Thank you. Good evening, councillors. Good evening, Paul. Is Clive here? Is Clive Ison with us?
No, Councillor Meredith, he hasn't joined the meeting as yet.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we'll start off item 1. Apologies, Alan Botwood. Okay, item 2. We go straight to item 2, deputations and public addresses.
Sorry, Chair, do apologise. I have an apology from Zoe Smith. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Have you recorded that, Tracy?
I have, yes. Thank you, Councillor Meredith.
Thank you very much. Deputations and public addresses. I've been notified that there isn't any. So I'm going to item 3. I'm going to the minutes, page 1. Does the panel agree that page 1 is a true copy?
Agreed.
Okay.
Yes.
No, page 2.
Yes, agreed.
Okay, all agreed. Thank you very much for that. Thank you. So now we're going to go straight to item 4, which is the Chair's draft report. And that starts from page 3 to 64. Okay, you've all had a copy of the draft report. What I'm intending to do is I'm going to go to page 56 and then 55. 56 is the start, and that's the definitions of food poverty. Okay. Are you all on page 56? Definitions of food poverty, item 5.1.1. Do you agree with those? Okay, Catherine, yeah. Catherine's nodding.
Agreed.
I can't.
Yes,
hello,
agreed.
Emma. Thank you. Right, so we now go to item 5.12. Did people agree with that? If I'm going too fast, just stop me. I can hear no dissent from there.
Chair, through you, if I may, would it be easier if we made a comment? It was silence if there's an agreement, but a comment if there isn't.
Okay, I'll just go through it then. Thank you. Okay, 5.13. 5.14. Food poverty children. 5.15. Thank you. 5.16. Scrutiny panel 5.17. Food poverty reviews and statistical data 5.1.8. 1, 2, 3. Thank you. 5.1.9. Thank you. 5.1.10a. Thank you. Emergency food aid, 5.1.11. Thank you. 5.1.12. Thank you. 5.1.13. Thank you. 5.1.14.
I'd like to make a comment, please,
Yes, all right, Catherine.
before we go on to the next area of the agenda. Quite often, teachers and social workers will observe that if a child is unable to invite a friend for lunch or socialize on that level, the chances are it's because the child is uncomfortable either with the state of its home, in other words, it doesn't have electricity or cooking pots or whatever, and perhaps there isn't enough food to invite another child home. So that often can be an indicator that the child is living in food.
Okay. Geraldine, do you want to make a comment on that, on Catherine's statement? Can you hear me, Geraldine?
I can. Sorry, I was just unmuting, Chair.
Sorry.
Yes, I think Catherine, I think you made a point of this earlier on when we were doing the panel, and I think it was when we had the Department of Work and Pensions visiting. So I think, I'm not sure, Tracy, whether it's been highlighted in the report at all somewhere. Might be worth us just seeing whether that point was highlighted.
I can double check that. It doesn't ring a bell, but I do remember now Councillor Russell mentioning that. So it can be added.
It might be worth adding.
We can add it.
That in there.
Yeah.
I couldn't see it in the report. Thank you.
Okay. But Tracy, if I'll carry on, and then you can look, and just when I finish, if you just let us know if you found it in the report. Okay. Right. So we go now to 5.1.15. Thank you. Assistance available and partnership working, which is 5.1.
Sorry, Chair. Sorry, Chair, I didn't unmute fast enough. My apologies. If I may, just on 5.115.
Okay.
It's really a fairly trivial point, but it just makes sense in relation to flow. That the sentence relating to stigma is perfectly acceptable, but the 0 hours contract sentence should be around the employability aspects and the living wage elements of the report. That was just a sort of a preference as to where it goes. It fits better in that particular topic. Feels like a throwaway comment where it is.
Okay.
I can move
Thank
that,
you.
Chair.
You're just doing that, Tracy. Do you want to just wait a sec while you do that, or before I carry on?
I won't do it now and share it online if you're okay, Councillor Meredith. I'll make notes and then I'll as it's updated, I'll share with the panel after the meeting. But I'm making notes as they make amendments.
Okay, that's fine. I'll now go back to 5.1.16. A little bit longer just to look at this one. Okay, thank you. Go on to 5.1.17. Thank you. 5.1.18. Could you just hold on a sec? I'm going to have to close my office door because my wife is downstairs and she's talking quite loud. Hold on. Sorry about that. I'll tell her off when I go down. Right, so we're going now to 5.1.18. Thank you. .1.19. Thank you. 5.120. Thank you. 5.1.21. Thank you. 5.122. And one more. Thank you for that one. One
Sorry,
more.
Chair, just on 5.122.
Yes.
When we had the conversations in session, if I recall, the advice that was given to us was that there was a lot of outreach that took place through schools and lots of advice had been given, but it was quite clear that that wasn't directed specifically in Northampton, if I recall. So I think that should be recorded there. I note that later on we make some recommendations around that, but I do think that that should be recorded there.
Okay. Tracy?
Yeah,
Emma's-
through you, Chair. If I add a sentence at the end, the scrutiny panel felt that this was not directed in Northampton. Is that wording okay?
Are you happy with that, Councillor?
Yeah, I think we agreed that we discussed in the session that it wasn't sufficiently aimed in Northampton. So perhaps we can't say there isn't any that occurs in Northampton, but it wasn't sufficiently aimed at Northampton.
Okay. Okay, so we're just the last what would be on the last one, won't we? Raising the profile. Now, where was I, Tracy? I've lost it. That was the last one anyway, wasn't it? So,
Recommendations number 6.
yeah. Right, so we're going to go to the recommendations, yeah? Okay, so we start from the recommendations. I'll do the same format, and if we've got any comments, can you please make them? If not, I'll move on. Is that okay? Right, so we 6.1.2, Scrutiny Panel 1 therefore recommends to Cabinet. Okay, so straight then on to 6.1.3. That's okay, that one. 6.1.
Sorry, Chair.
Yeah.
On 6.1.3, I completely agree with the recommendation, but I wonder if there should be an outcome. What are we going to do with that information? Is there a recommendation that we investigate and analyse where the gaps are, but then we get together to see what can be done about those gaps?
Emma, if you look up on the other page, I've been reading the recommendations. That does cover it further, doesn't it, on the other page? I
didn't think so, Chair. I have read it. And I didn't think it specifically said what we're going to do with that data.
Okay, let's just go back to Geraldine then. Geraldine, did you pick up that point?
Sorry, Chair, I did pick up that point. I was just reading on just to recap where it might have been, where it may have been covered, because I hadn't picked up on that. So I agree that we should expand on it, even if it is slightly covered later on, to include that we work with the food banks to identify the areas where there are gaps, to identify what support can be organised in those areas.
Yeah, just on Emma's point, there is gaps. in the last two to 3 weeks, I've discovered that there is gaps throughout the town where food banks could set up. So I do take your point, Emma, that we could expand on that to be that the Borough Council explores where there's food, where there's gaps, where food poverty exists, and food banks could then be encouraged to put in place. What do you think of that, Emma?
Yeah, I just want to have something done with the information. So we identify the gaps and then we come back together. Not necessarily, I say we as a royal sort of we, a group comes back together and identifies how we fill those gaps, or what we do in other areas to mean that the gap isn't there anymore. You know, the gap isn't needed.
Yeah, we will be coming back. Overview and scrutiny will take this back in 6 months' time to overview and scrutiny, so we can have another look at it. So do you agree, Emma, with what I suggested?
Yeah, I think if Geraldine or Tracy can just word that in a manner of bringing the data back in for a reassessment and a new action plan around that, whether that be from officers within the borough or a working group, however that may be, but that we don't just get the data and then pop it to one side and say, lovely, we know where the gaps are, but don't do anything with it. Thank you.
That's fine. Tracy, have you got that?
I have, yes. Thank you, Councillor Meredith.
Okay, thank you very much.
I know excuse me, Chair, through you, I know we're going to go on 63 and item 6.1.6 in view of the fact that we're moving to the unitary, one hopes, in April, May next year. And there are a list of recommendations. I'm not sure if recommendations are the same as outcomes.
Well, can I suggest, Catherine, if you're in agreement, let's just finish 6.1.4 and then we'll come on to that and then you can make your points. Okay, otherwise we're going to get confused if we jump in. All right. Right, so we're now on 6.1.4. Any comments? No. Thank you for that. I'm trying to think where I can fit what Catherine has said. We just go on to 6.1.5. I think, Catherine, do you about the unitary one comes down onto the next one. No, so we do 6.1.5. Any comments on that one? No. So this is the one where Catherine, 6.1.6. Catherine, do you want to make that point again?
Simply that we've got a list of recommendations, and to go with Councillor Roberts, what she'd said earlier about outcomes. I think outcomes is something that we all work for and hope to achieve. And I'm wondering if these recommendations covers some of the outcomes or whether we need to add further to the recommendations in view of the fact, as Councillor Roberts said, we're looking for outcomes.
Okay. Right. So, Geraldine, do you want to answer them questions? Geraldine.
Sorry, I'm muted now. So thank you for that, Councillor Roberts. Yeah, I absolutely agree with regards to outcomes, and just going through that list of the actions that we're hoping to achieve from this recommendation. I would very much hope that those actions are outcomes. So to develop a food action plan to tackle food poverty, to develop that, I'm hoping that there'll be some clear outcomes that absolutely come from there. But we could add the word outcomes in here to ensure that there are sufficient outcomes from here. But I do feel, Chair, that would enable us to, the actions along there would definitely enable us to get the outcomes that we would want.
Yeah, I would agree with that, Dean.
Yeah, the one thing we did talk about previously, and I have read these, but I'm just looking at it now, is the poverty strategy.
Yeah.
So we talked an awful lot about the importance of having a poverty strategy going into unitary. And Tracy, forgive me, because yes, it is on there. It's at the very beginning. Yeah, so that strategy would absolutely drive those outcomes that you're looking for there, Councillor Russell.
Are you happy, Catherine, with that?
Yep. Thank you.
Okay. Right. So these from point 6.1.6, I want to go through these to make sure that these outcomes we got here are okay. So the first bullet point, the developing of food poverty plan to tackle food poverty. Bullet point 2. I want to ask a question from bullet point 3 about promoting breastfeeding via the baby friendly initiative. Do we, Emma might be able to help me on this. Emma, do we know if that the breast feeding advice centre is still up and running?
I'm afraid I can't answer the question for you, Chair. The only groups I've worked with are independent groups, so I don't know about any locally run or borough run or funded group, I'm afraid.
4 years ago, I went on a protest march and I also contributed funds from my council's empowerment thing. You know, it used to be, they used to have their own centre where women could go and get advice on breastfeeding. My own daughter actually used to go there, and she said
Was that the baby cafe, Councillor
Yes,
Meredith?
it was. Yeah, we don't know if it's still in.
The baby cafe was closed down due to the funds being withdrawn and reduction of funding.
Right. Okay. So I'll go on then. Okay. So there's not a lot. I was going to say that I thought that would be a good recommendation, but we can't do that if they're closed down now. Right. Bullet point 4. Bullet point 5.
Just on point 4, sorry, harnessing the value of children's centres, given that we are low on the ground for any type of centre of that, is it an appropriate recommendation for us, or is it is it more about looking into the value of having them back and having them available?
Absolutely. That's actually what it means, is that the cabinet should go and find out really and do a review of what is actually happening now with children's centres. So we could make that a bit clearer if you wanted to, and I agree entirely with you on that one.
I think we have to, Chair. For me, harnessing the value of children's centres means going to them and educating people about what goes on there and harnessing the value that they offer. But if they're not there, we can't harness that value. It's got to be about promoting the need for
I agree.
Children's centres.
I'm with you on that one. Can you, Tracy? Did you get the sentiments of that?
Yeah, I did. And if this is the wording that you would like, promoting the value of children's centres rather than harnessing the value of.
Yeah.
Promoting the need for.
That would be fine.
Better.
Yeah, promoting. Yeah, that's fine.
I think so. You may have to change the beginning sentence, Tracy, because I think the if we're adapting the recommendations to ours, we were referencing them as being recommendations by Sustain. So we may just have to shift that around.
I'll put the word adapted or something like that in.
Thank you.
Right, I did say bullet point 5, but we went back. So just ask that one again. Bullet point 5, bullet point 6, bullet point 7, bullet point 8, bullet point 9.
Sorry, Chair. On
8.
bullet point 8, becoming the living wage employer and promoting the living wage. I think that we have to be stronger than that, because NBC is already taken the living wage employer in house, but doesn't follow that through to a living wage accreditation.
Yeah.
I would much prefer a strong recommendation in that
Okay,
regard.
let's see what Geraldine's got a point on that one. Geraldine, can you reassure Emma, please?
Yeah, so yeah, Councillor Roberts is absolutely correct. So currently we are not an accredited living wage employee. So we are a living wage employee and we do promote it within our contracts. But the recommendation I think that Councillor Roberts is asking for there is that we become an accredited living wage employee as a unitary council.
Absolutely. And I think there could be a recommendation for, I appreciate the borough doesn't have long left, but there was a motion passed for the borough to become an accredited living wage employer. So, and anything from the borough should transfer into the unitary. So for me, that we need to place some emphasis on that, so that when we first transition, it's there already, it's in the forefront.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, so you're happy with that, Councillor Roberts? Yeah. Okay.
Sorry, Councillor Meredith, through you, Chair.
Yeah.
I would also like to have something that is a bit more explicit, ensuring children's access to food 365 days a year. Well, of course we would like to do that, but it's not saying how. And I think I'd like to see a statement about investigating and developing developing access so that children have food 365 days a year, because I don't believe that is the case at the moment.
Yeah. Can I can I bring in Paul Foster? Paul, are you there, Paul?
Yeah.
Hi, Paul. Your organisation actually supplies from food in the holidays, don't you?
We only do one week each school holiday.
Oh, just 1 week in school holidays. Okay.
And there's
Oh,
there's no provision either at weekends.
Okay. So, okay, Paul, thanks for that.
Through you, Chair, I agree with Catherine. A recommendation around having funding available, or looking to support sources of funding for holiday clubs and food holiday clubs, and after school and before clubs that are supported should be a goal for us, particularly for the unitary authority.
We could say that the Cabinet should be looking at sources of funding to make sure children have the 360 days a year resources. Yeah. Tracy, have you got that? Councillor Roberts wants that put in.
So I've got that, Councillor Meredith.
Oh, that's wonderful. Okay. And I'll move on now to bullet point 8. That's ensuring that residents have a physical access to good food. That seems okay. Bullet point 9.
Chair, again, through you, it's my understanding that Meals on Wheels do not exist either in Northampton or in this county. So it's supporting and enhancing the provision of meals to vulnerable residents or vulnerable people. But Meals on Wheels, as far as I know, do not exist.
Can I just let you know that on the county council, they still do supply Meals on Wheels, but at a great enhanced price, and a lot of people have chosen not to take it up on board, but they still do it, in my understanding.
Chair, is that just for council-owned care homes, or can people living in retirement villages or independent homes have access to that?
If they're on benefits, or I believe they get a reduced rate, but anybody can apply for it. But a lot of people haven't now, because during when the county council was making cuts to expenditure, that's what they increased. They increased the Meals on Wheels service, and a lot of people didn't take it up. But I can't speak for them. What I could do is because that is an important point you've made, Councillor Russell. I could ask Geraldine to have a look into that, and if it's still the if the Meals on Wheels service still exists, then we can leave that as it is. Would you be happy with that, Councillor Russell?
Yes, as long as there is some qualification about who would be benefiting from it, or the way that people can access it. I'm not quite sure what people need, what financial status people need to have to access it. If that is relevant, and you know, you talk about the cost. So do we need to say enhancing, supporting and enhancing reasonably costed meals or reasonably priced meals in provision?
Actually, we could do that on that particular one. We could ask the Cabinet to try to support this food poverty report by saying that reducing the cost of Meals on Wheels, so people could afford to pay it. Because, you know, as I said, you'll see in the next one. I think what we do, Councillor Russell, is let Geraldine make some inquiries, and Tracy, if there is Meals on Wheels still available in its present form, then we can alter that to fit it. I think that's the only thing at this stage we could do.
Chair, if I can, interestingly, I've just had a look at the point because Catherine's raised it, and Northamptonshire adult social services don't make any reference at all to Meals on Wheels being provided through the county. So there should be something there around definitely enhancing the service. So any service that is available being advertised and promoted and passed out to people, rather than simply an advert for, and I won't reference any names, but private organisations who are able to supply meals at a cost.
Yeah, I've just come back with a thought on that. Being a county councillor, rather than Geraldine making some inquiries, it might be just as well for me to make some inquiries, and to, because I mean, that is an interesting point. I want to see, because I was under the impression that the Meals on Wheels service was still available. So I can make some inquiries and get back to Tracy, and then we can do that appropriately. I think at this stage that's all we can do, because we can't actually put anything in there at the moment. If we can hold that recommendation till I can get some information, I can do that tomorrow. Yep, Geraldine.
Thank you, Chair. Can I also just ask, at the beginning of those points, so 6.1.6, Chair, could we add the word investigation in there? So where it says that we move to the West Northamptonshire Authority, and that the way forward is investigated, because all of these points that we've been through need to be investigated to identify what is working and what isn't. And then on the second line, in relation to the to producing the anti-food poverty strategy including outcomes for the following. So just, Tracy, if we could add in investigation and outcomes into that, because I feel as though we're then going to get a strategy that will tell us what is happening now and also what outcomes we need to prevent the food poverty.
That's quite good actually, Geraldine. Thank you for that. Okay. Let me see now. The last bullet point, what number is that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 10. Yeah, bullet point 10. Okay, and this is
Chair, just on that point, I don't have a problem with that particular recommendation, but I discussed at the last session, and I discussed with Geraldine a recommendation around funding and supporting crisis support. I don't know whether the comment I want to make should go there or whether it goes as a section on its own. I don't really mind either way, but I thought it was the right time to raise it. I'd obviously raised issues previously about the relationship with community law and making sure they were well supported. Geraldine very kindly gathered some history and data and information that enabled me to look at that position. But I requested a recommendation around looking, or MBC or the West Northampton Authority looking at a grants officer and potentially having someone who constantly monitors the funding that's available and supports the gathering of that funding for MBC and its partners. So anybody that we work very closely with, or that the West Northampton Authority will work very closely with, they have somebody to communicate and collectively gather that funding to make sure that everybody's getting the bite of the cherry that they deserve. Because we know that there's a lot of funding out there, small pots, but they don't necessarily get captured by local authorities.
Okay. Tracy, you?
Yep, Councillor Meredith, that might be better as a standalone recommendation rather than going as one of the actions.
Okay.
I've got the wording, but I will firm it up, and then obviously it will. What I'll do is I'll send it round after the meeting, and any changes in red type, so that it'll be highlighted to councillors what's been updated, so you can see that for update.
Yeah,
I know in normal circumstances we do it at the meeting, but it's rather tricky to do it over Zoom.
Yeah, thank you for that. Are you happy with that, Councillor Roberts?
Super, very efficient as always, Tracy. Thank you.
Yeah,
and thank you, Geraldine, for the effort you went to in getting the information that I needed.
I'm just going to turn my light on because it's getting quite dark and you won't be able to see me. Oh, for the dark night to come in. Right, that's better. You can see me properly now. Right, I want to put another bullet point in to make it bullet point 11. I've come just recently, quite a few pensioners, elderly, especially the elderly pensioners in their 80s, are living just on a state pension. And a lot of them, when I've spoken to them, are not applying for pension credit, and it's putting them into poverty. And I want to make sure that some way the Borough Council can make sure that elderly pensioners, especially pensioners over 80, are claiming pension credit, because a lot of them don't have computers, they're not computer illiterate. So Geraldine, you said you could help me on this one.
Yes. Again, I almost want to say that it's a standalone recommendation, because I think it's an important one, and as are all of those points, but I do think it's separate from a strategy. So I would suggest a separate recommendation that says that we promote pensions within obviously the forums that we have set up at the moment. And I know we have got a pensioners forum set up at the moment, so we could organise, once that's back up and running, a presentation with regards to benefits available. And also alongside that, I think it's something that we should highlight that Northampton Partnership Homes are able to recognise pensionable age and do some work with those tenants, because the particular case that you and I have been working on together recently, the tenant has been a Northampton Partnership Homes tenant for some time, and unfortunately at some point he would have been entitled to these pension to this benefit, but unfortunately got missed. He wasn't aware of it, and that there was no information available to him. So I think it'd be quite easy to do a search on our system to identify people that are coming to a certain age and actually doing some promotion work with regards to the benefits they may be entitled to.
That's brilliant. Lovely for that. Tracy, over to you, Tracy.
Sorry,
Yeah.
that was quite long-winded, Tracy.
I've got that, and
Thank you.
I think if you're in agreement, it would be better, as like Geraldine says, as a standalone recommendation rather than as part of the action plan.
That's absolutely brilliant.
Chair, through you, just as a...
Hold on. Councillor
Sorry.
Russell, Councillor Roberts, are you happy with me putting that in as a standalone one? And can I also suggest to councillors that they talk to their elderly residents when you get the opportunity and just say to them, are they receiving pension credit? Okay. Did you want to make a comment, Emma?
I did, Chair, thank you. First comment was simply that I think that suggestion is a phenomenal one as far as looking at the data and highlighting it, being proactive rather than reactive to the situation. And I wouldn't even mind if those words could be included in the statement, Tracy, for being proactive rather than reactive to everything. And then I think it should be a standalone comment, but I just wondered whether, as a general comment on the anti-food strategy actions, is it whether we make something along the lines of the food poverty strategy must include all demographics and all age groups, because we've learned through this food poverty panel that it is families and young children that are affected, and it is single people that are affected, and it is some homeless people that are affected, but it is also elderly people and elderly single people and elderly couples who look after each other that are affected. So something that just shows that it's an all-inclusive food poverty strategy to look at the wide topic.
That's brilliant. Yeah, that's really good. And thanks for the comments, Emma. I was quite shocked. I have to say, I was quite shocked to find out the amount of pensioners who are not receiving pension credit, and that they're struggling just on the basic pension, which is absolutely peanuts, really. And food poverty then hits them where they stop eating, and their lives are shortened, because if they're not eating the proper vitamins and the proper foods, then they go into depression. And it's not a case of one or two. It's not a case of one or two. It's a lot of people, pensioners, who are too proud to claim that benefit. And if we can do anything in this panel to help that, we've achieved quite a lot. Thank you for that. Right, so you've got that then, Tracy, that's fine. So we now before we move on, ask the Councillor Russell and Councillor Roberts, is there anything else additionally you want to put in this as a standout alone, or as a bullet point?
Thank you, Chair. The only comment I had is that, again, a motion was passed from MBC in respect of creating an anti-food or an anti-poverty strategy, not an anti-food poverty strategy, but an anti-poverty strategy as a whole. I think to ensure that that's something that's carried through, we need to recognise that fact in the initial statement.
Thank you. Councillor Russell? Are you there, Catherine?
Opportunity, Chair. It's not, in my experience, I have quite a big range of aged of residents aged, say 50 to 65 in my ward. And they're also, some of them are also finding things very difficult financially. So it's not just the young or the families or the over 80s, it's also people in that age range who were made redundant or jobless and unable to get a job over 50, a lot of them. They still have mortgages, their families may still be at university or in further education, and they are struggling desperately to make ends meet. So it is a wider range anti-poverty strategy that.
Okay, that's fine. That's fine. Okay then. Thank you for that. So we now go just to 6.1.7. Okay, thank you. 6.1.8. I'd just like to say on that one, we did promote that through the committee from that app to be made available, and I'm so glad that's in there. 6.1.9. This is a good one. This one, it would be, in the moment of time, it would be difficult with this coronavirus, but if everything's returned to normal, something could be done at the Guildhall, where we could have a festival, or not a festival, but we could have an information put out and ask people to come along and talk to different organisations. So that's what I think that should actually be.
Just on that point, Chair, if I may.
Yeah.
I think it's important for that to remain as a recommendation as is, because
Yeah.
in the ideal world, in a business as usual environment, that would be where we would be heading. But perhaps there should be an addition to it that, in light of the recent events, promotion of food poverty and highlighting food poverty through other channels is also appropriate, just simply so that the recommendation doesn't get lost entirely by the fact that we're obviously affected by a global pandemic.
It could be lost, and I'll take your point. And we will return to when we return on the overview. And well, we might not be there, but when it does return, it needs to be looked at more widely. Okay, thank you. Hold on, 6.1.10. This is your one, Emma. You remember?
The Healthy Start voucher scheme. I'm not sure it's my one. It's a regularly utilised program. It's
the one you wanted in, didn't you?
Yes, it's really important to be there. I had a minor comment in that it's just a small typo that needs correcting, so that we don't promote a different type of scheme, just in case there is another one called something similar. And it may not be a consensus of the panel, but I would like a recommendation to look at promoting the increase and extension of the Healthy Start voucher scheme through the organisations.
Okay, that's fine. Point 6.111. This is the one that I wanted in. That is good. It's not just allotments, but shops and Borough Council could be contacting those things. So that's okay. Everybody happy with that? Yeah. Turn over. Right. 6.1.12.
Through you, Chair, if I may. I completely agree with the recommendation as far as Northampton being promoted, but I think we should go further and recommend that the authority is promoted and becomes a living wage authority and sustainable food authority. I appreciate that covers a very large area, but that's what we are dealing with. So
Yeah.
we need to look to the skies of what we're dealing with and make sure the whole area is covered.
Okay, okay. Councillor Roberts, are you happy with as it is written down there now, or do you want it slightly altered?
I think it should be slightly altered. So it's recommended to the West Northamptonshire Authority that Northampton is promoted, as well as further promotion. I'm not going to get that wording right. Tracy knows where I'm going. Geraldine knows where I'm going. They're smiling at me. It's recommended to the West Northamptonshire Authority that Northampton and the whole of the West Northamptonshire Authority is promoted to be and becomes a living wage and sustainable food town.
Okay. If they're smiling at you, I can't see them. Have you got that, Tracy? Tracy? Hold on.
Yes, Councillor Meredith.
Oh, that's all right. Okay. Point 6.1.13. 6.1.14.
I'd like to make a comment on that, please.
Yes, go on.
That a copy of this report is provided to the MPs within West Northamptonshire. Is it possible to request or even demand that our MPs respond or in some way acknowledge this report? Because otherwise it's just going to sit on a desk somewhere and they probably won't even see it.
Yeah, I would agree.
Good point.
A good point. I would agree. We could add, we're next to Northamptonshire, asking for the MPs to comment on the report.
Through you, Chair, if I may, how about a little bit further than that? I'm not sure we can compel them, although I know Catherine's smiling at me, I'm sure we'd like to, but
Actually,
rather than compel,
Emma,
maybe ask them to comment. Yeah,
we do vote them in.
yes, I know, but I meant as a group. I'm not sure that we could compel them to respond to the document that's sent to them, but perhaps is sent to them for comment and a request to provide information as to how they will be supporting the recommendations and supporting recommendation 6.1.13, which then links with regards to the national policy on food poverty.
That's okay. I'm happy with that.
I'd like to point out too, as well, Chair, that we was a very loosely used word when you said that we did vote them, and that was quite a wide range.
You didn't vote them in, and nor did I. Well, we won't go down that road. Okay. Right. So the last one thing is 6.1.15. And they must agree with that anyway. Okay. Right. Well, that finishes my chair's report. Before I move on to the next item on the agenda, I have to say thank you, both councillors and Paul, for bearing and going through that report. It's actually looks like we had quite a good consensus, I think. And I'd also like to give my thanks to Geraldine for her input, and especially to Tracy for being so tolerant with me as the chair and for helping me to put this report together. Thank you for that. That must be noted from that. Additional item 5. We're early. Item 5. Scrutiny panel to note the work around the child poverty in Britain undertaken. We actually didn't go to Marcus Ratchford because with the COVID virus, mostly the football players are on lockdown and not allowed to go out anywhere. So there wasn't no point. In other times, it would have been a good idea if he'd have come. but he wouldn't be able to come because his club who he plays for wouldn't allow it anyway. So there wasn't any point in inviting him. So I'm sorry about that, Catherine. I know that's what you wanted, but I said as the chair that because of the lockdown situation, there would be no point. Are you okay with that, Catherine?
Well, it's a shame. He could have. He could have sent us a written statement, perhaps verified by his club. I do understand the constraints around there, and I just think that what he did and the way that he managed to turn the whole holiday food provision into something that was absolutely amazing. I thought he needed that recognition, but I do appreciate your comments.
Yeah, thank you for that.
Through you, Chair. If I may, just on that point, however, we're meeting on Zoom, so we could invite Marcus to, or I'm saying that as if I know him as a friend. I obviously don't. We could invite Marcus Rashford to come along to a Zoom meeting, or just to take part in a Zoom meeting with some of the groups. We could perhaps try and facilitate it at all. I just wonder whether having Northampton as part of his studies and as part of the national action plan just really goes along with the recommendations we're making about lobbying for change and national policy. I understand it's entirely your decision, Chair, but I think we could go wider than that, perhaps as a scrutiny panel generally.
I think we can go a little bit wider than that. What I'm thinking is about if we go back to where we could have that food poverty fair. That's the sort of thing we could do. Bearing that in mind. That'd be one of the speakers perhaps who could come along and speak. That would be. I'm sure if a vaccine is not discovered in 6 months' time, we'll all be up the creek. So we just have to see how it goes, on that. So will you bear with us on that, because we've got a good report here. Let's get cracking with it now and get it to cabinet. Yeah. Okay. Well, I think that's it. The only thing left for me to say is to thank Paul and Clive Ison for their input and for all the people who have come and give us evidence. I have to say, it has been a really good food poverty action scrutiny work situation, and it's been really brilliant. And thank you, everybody. And I declare that the meeting is now closed. Thank you.
Thank you.